Welcome. Do I look a little more dull today? Today I'm testing the flat picture profile on my Nikon Z6 to see if I can get better color out of it than I've been getting on the normal profile. So I've been switching between neutral and standard, and I found standard is definitely way too punched up with the color, and the contrast was pretty high too. It looks good, but the color was ridiculously over the top. So my face was coming out bright red, and it's definitely not supposed to be that color. So here's a little piece of white thing so I can white balance like a lot of people love to do on camera. And we'll see how this looks graded instead of ungraded. And I'm just going to use, Final Cut Pro because that's what I like to edit with. I also have access to Premiere and DaVinci Resolve, both good pieces of software. So I'm noticing a lot of videos on Adobe pissing off their customers and people looking for Adobe alternatives. So I think that's a healthy thing. One company having too much control over all the creative software is a bad thing, and we've definitely seen Adobe misbehaving in this arena in the past little while, sending out letters telling us, oh, we've got to delete our older versions of the software or risk a lawsuit from somebody, some third party. So there's that, and then their new licensing and the fact they're testing new pricing on people. It's all got people annoyed with Adobe, and so they should be. They're trying to turn the software into a revenue stream where you're renting the software, and that implies that they're constantly updating the software and improving it. Not just fixing bugs, but adding new features. And yeah, they've added a few new features here and there, but if you look at CS6, which was the last version you could buy outright, and you compare it to today's version, aside from the fact they don't support Camera Raw in CS6 anymore, which, if they had kept supporting it, you could easily still use CS6. I mean, the only really big jump in technology was the Camera Raw update that we saw recently, and those things tend to come along all by themselves, and they're not necessarily adding a lot of features. They're just getting a little bit more out of those RAW files that you so carefully shot way back when. You did shoot RAW, not JPEG, right? Because if not, you're kind of left high and dry when these technology improvements come along. So I can take a shot that I did on my Nikon D5000 back in 2009, and with the new RAW processing in Camera Raw, get more detail out of it and have better noise reduction, and generally get a better image out of that original just because I had the foresight to shoot in RAW. So thank you, Jared Poland, Fro Knows Photo, for refuting Ken Rockwell's suggestion of shooting in JPEG all the time, which I did live to regret. I did take his advice for a while when I was new to digital and shot JPEG only, and not for long. And then I switched over to RAW, and I've never looked back. So in terms of Photoshop replacements, you got to ask yourself the question, do you really use all the features of Photoshop? Do you really need all of those features? So if you're just doing basic photography things like white balance, crop, export to another size, maybe fix a few dust spots, there's plenty of apps that can do that for free, or for very little money. In fact, most camera companies put out basic editing software for their own RAW files. So there are a number of ways to get RAW processing It might even be better than the raw processing you find in Adobe. Who knows? Capture One, you can use the trial before you spend money on it. Affinity Photo, Affinity Pro. There's a lot of these things out there. So I encourage you to check out these alternatives. Me, I'm lucky I have access to Creative Cloud through my work, so I don't have to pay for it. I can just use it, which is wonderful. So I don't really care, too much when Adobe does these idiotic things like trying to double their pricing overnight and just gave you a few gigs of online storage to make you feel better about it. No, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So, they're trying to see how far they can push before the photographers and creatives will push back and say, no, you do this, we're going to go find some other pieces of software to do our work. And I think we're at a tipping point right now. And, if you look back in history, there are some pretty compelling stories that were very, very similar to Adobe's story. And they should know, because look at Quark. Do you remember Quark? Way back when Quark Express was at the pinnacle of desktop publishing. And, to this day, people are still using one particular version of Quark that was really nice. I forget, it was like version 3.11 or something. Whatever it was, there are still people using that software even today. But they got so arrogant with their pricing and their anti-piracy dongles and things that people left them and went to Adobe InDesign. Right? So InDesign took over where Quark left off. And now Adobe's making the same sorts of arrogant mistakes that Quark made back in the day. Oh, we're so big, nobody can afford to leave us. Well, they can and they will. So that's all I have to say about that. Thanks for watching, and fade out.